A biker gang harasses an old veteran at the farmer's market, shoving the 78-year-old Korean War hero to the ground and destroying his groceries while laughing at his military service. The leather-clad thugs think they've found another easy target as they surround the fallen soldier, mocking his age and threatening the terrified elderly vendors. But the quiet stranger in simple clothes who steps forward isn't just another concerned citizen. This is Donnie Yen himself. The gang leader has no idea he just bullied a war hero in front of a martial arts legend who's spent decades perfecting the art of destroying arrogant predators. While the bikers rev their engines and brandish weapons, the action star approaches with that deadly calm his fans know means someone's about to learn a very painful lesson. The veteran recognizes his unlikely savior and struggles to his feet, knowing these young punks are about to discover why some warriors never stop fighting. The gang keeps posturing and threatening, thinking their numbers and attitude will intimidate this small challenger, but they're actually facing a man who turns impossible odds into legendary beatdowns. What happens when a motorcycle gang picks the wrong fight with the wrong hero? Will these leather-wearing bullies survive learning why legends earn their reputation? What happened next would terrorize the gang leader for the rest of his pathetic existence. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Earl Kowalski adjusted his Korean War veteran's cap in the bathroom mirror, the faded fabric showing its age but still worn with unmistakable pride. At 78, his morning routine remained as precise as his military training. Bed made with hospital corners, breakfast dishes already washed and dried, medication taken with clockwork regularity. The small apartment bore witness to a lifetime of service. Framed medals hung beside a photograph of a younger Earl in uniform, standing beside a beautiful woman whose smile still lit up the room despite her absence. The drive to Millbrook's farmer's market took him through familiar streets in his well-maintained Buick, past the houses where neighbors waved from their porches. Saturday mornings had become sacred since Margaret's passing 5 years ago, a weekly pilgrimage that gave structure to days that otherwise stretched too long and quiet. Earl parked in his usual spot near the town square, where the market sprawled, beneath colorful canopies and hand-painted signs. The morning air carried the scent of fresh bread from Klaus Weber's bakery stand and the earthy smell of vegetables still damp with morning dew. Children darted between the stalls while their parents examined produce, creating the kind of small-town scene that reminded Earl why he'd fought in a war half a world away. "Morning, Earl." Martha Brennan called from her vegetable stand, her weathered hands already busy arranging tomatoes in neat rows. At 74, she moved with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to work through arthritis pain. "Got some beautiful tomatoes today. Picked them fresh yesterday." Earl smiled, selecting the ripest ones while Martha added extras to his bag without being asked. It was their weekly ritual, her way of thanking him for the respect he'd always shown her late husband. From Martha's stand, he made his way to Klaus Weber's bakery display, where the German immigrant's thick accent couldn't diminish the warmth of his greeting, then to the flower vendor for his weekly bouquet. White roses for Margaret's grave, BY 945. Earl carried 2 bags of groceries toward his car, pausing to watch children play on the town square's old playground. There, laughter echoed off the brick buildings, innocent and carefree in a way that made his sacrifice feel worthwhile. In the distance, the rumble of motorcycle engines grew steadily louder, causing Earl to glance toward Main Street with the instinctive wariness of an old soldier who'd learned to read the approach of trouble. The rumble became a roar as 12 Harley-Davidsons rounded the corner in tight formation, their chrome gleaming in the morning sun like a mechanized cavalry charge. The Crimson Serpents Motorcycle Club had arrived, and their leader made sure everyone knew it. Danny "Tank" Morrison revved his engine one final time before dismounting. 6 feet 4 inches of scarred muscle and bad intentions, his massive frame decorated with tattoos that told stories of violence and dishonor. Tank surveyed the market like a predator selecting prey, his gold teeth catching the light when he grinned. The serpent tattoo across his bare chest seemed to writhe as his muscles flexed, while leather chaps and a vest displaying gang patches completed the intimidating picture. Behind him, his lieutenant Razor, Pete swung off his bike with nervous Energy, multiple knife handles visible on his belt. The effect on the market was immediate. Some customers hurriedly gathered their purchases and headed for their cars, sensing the change in atmosphere. Vendors tried to look busy while keeping nervous eyes on the newcomers. The cheerful morning bustle gave way to an uncomfortable tension. As thick as morning fog, that Tank's boots clicked against the pavement as he approached Klaus Weber's bakery stand with deliberate menace. The elderly German baker looked up from arranging fresh loaves, his flour-dusted apron suddenly seeming inadequate protection against the mountain of muscle bearing down on him. "Nice little setup you got here, old man," Tank said, his voice carrying the casual threat of someone accustomed to getting his way through intimidation. "Be a real shame if something happened to it. Accidents happen all the time around here." Klaus's hands trembled slightly as he continued arranging his bread, pretending not to understand the implication. I just sell bread. Good bread, made. Fresh every morning. That's real nice," Tank continued, running a thick finger along the display case. "Thing is, running a business can be dangerous. Vandalism, theft, fires, lots of risks. Lucky for you, the Crimson Serpents provide protection services. 200 a week keeps all those bad things from happening." Klaus's face went pale. 200? But I barely make enough to pay my rent and buy flour. Tank slammed his fist down on the display case, sending loaves scattering across the ground. "Then you better find new ways to make money, Grandpa, because this ain't a negotiation." His cold eyes swept across the market, searching for his next victim, and settled on Martha Brennan's vegetable stand where the elderly woman was trying to make herself invisible behind her tomato display. Martha Brennan's hands shook as she watched Tank Morrison's bulk approach her modest vegetable stand. At 74, she'd weathered many storms in her life. The death of her husband, the struggle to make ends meet on a teacher's pension, the daily battle with arthritis that made every movement painful. But nothing had prepared her for the cold malice in the giant biker's eyes. Tank deliberately knocked over her carefully arranged basket of apples with his boot, sending the fruit rolling across the pavement. Well, what do we have here? Another entrepreneur who needs our protection services. Please," Martha whispered, her voice barely audible above the market's nervous murmur. "I'm just an old woman trying to make a living. These vegetables are all I have." "That's real touching, Grandma," Tank sneered, picking up her cash box and shaking it like a rattle. The day's modest earnings, $47, jingled inside. But age don't exempt nobody from business expenses. $150 a week, starting now. Martha's eyes filled with tears. On a good week, she might clear $200 after paying for seeds, fertilizer, and gas for her ancient pickup truck. Tank's demand would leave her with barely enough to survive, let alone maintain her small garden plot behind her cottage. "I can't afford that much," she pleaded. "Maybe if you could take $25? I give good vegetables, always fresh." Razor Pete appeared beside his leader, his scarred face twisted in amusement. "Boss, maybe we should redecorate this place. Help the old lady understand how things work around here." 30 feet away, Earl Kowalski finished loading his groceries into his Buick's trunk. Margaret had always loved Martha's tomatoes, praising their taste and the kindness of the woman who grew them. When he heard Martha's frightened voice carrying across the market square, saying, "Please, I'm just an old woman," something deep inside his chest tightened like a fist. Earl set down his bags with deliberate care and turned toward Martha's stand. His slight limp became less noticeable as his military bearing reasserted itself, shoulders back, spine straight, eyes focused with the intensity that had served him well in Korea when young soldiers looked to him for leadership under fire. The distance between his car and Martha's stand might as well have been the gap between right and wrong, and Earl Kowalski had never been one to stand on the wrong side of that line. "That's enough." His voice cut through the tension with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Leave the lady alone." Tank Morrison turned slowly, his amusement evident as he took in the sight of his new challenger. The old man approaching looked like he might blow over in a strong wind. White hair beneath a faded military cap, slight frame moving with careful steps, probably hadn't seen the inside of a gym since the Eisenhower administration. Tank's gang began to spread out in a loose semicircle, their laughter rippling through the morning air. "What we got here, boys?" Tank called to his crew, his voice dripping with mock concern. Captain America come to save the day? You fight in the Civil War, Pops. Earl positioned himself between Martha and Tank, his weathered hands steady despite the tremor of age. Up close, the biker was even more imposing, easily twice Earl's weight and 4 decades younger. But Earl had faced worse odds in Korea, when Chinese soldiers had seemed to pour endlessly over frozen hills while he and his squad held a bridge that meant the difference between evacuation and massacre. Sir, I serve my country with honor, Earl said, his voice calm and measured. Now I'm asking you respectfully to leave this woman be. She's done nothing to deserve your threats. Tank's amusement curdled into something darker. Being challenged by an elderly man in front of his gang was exactly the kind of disrespect that demanded a violent response. You got some stones, old man. I'll give you that. But you picked the wrong day to play hero. Earl helped Martha collect her scattered apples while keeping his eyes on Tank, using movements that spoke of military training even after all these years. He'd learned long ago that showing fear only encouraged bullies, and despite the odds, he felt the familiar calm that had served him in combat situations. Martha, you just step back now, Earl said quietly, patting her shoulder with gentle reassurance. Everything's going to be fine. Tank's patience evaporated. With a snarl, he shoved Earl hard in the chest with both hands, sending the elderly veteran stumbling backward into Martha's tomato display. Earl hit the ground hard, tomatoes scattering around him like small red grenades, his military cap flying off to reveal thinning white hair. Martha cried out, rushing to help him up, but Tank kicked Earl's grocery bags, sending cans and packages rolling across the pavement. Stay down, old man, before you get yourself hurt worse than you already are. Earl struggled to his hands and knees, his pride wounded more deeply than his body. As he reached for his veteran's cap, determined to stand again despite the pain. Shooting through his ribs, a quiet voice spoke in lightly accented English. Perhaps you gentlemen should move along. Every head in the market square turned toward the calm voice. Near Uncle Chin's traditional medicine shop, a man in his mid-50s stood watching the confrontation with the stillness of deep water. Average height and lean build, he wore simple, dark pants and a plain gray shirt that suggested someone who preferred to blend into crowds rather than stand out from them. The stranger stepped forward with fluid, confident movement, his posture relaxed but alert in a way that suggested coiled potential. His dark eyes never left Tank as he approached, hands loose at his sides, moving with an economy of motion that spoke of perfect body control. The gentleman asked you to leave the lady alone, he said, his accented English precise and measured. Perhaps it's time you listened. Tank sized up this new challenger, noting the Asian features and the calm demeanor that seemed completely unaffected by the presence of a dozen armed bikers. After the embarrassment of being defied by an old man, here was another do-gooder who apparently didn't understand how things worked in the real world. Another old-timer thinks he's tough? Tank's voice carried to every corner of the market. You picked the wrong day to play hero, Jackie Chan. Maybe you didn't notice, but this is serpent territory now. The stranger simply nodded politely and took a small step back, giving himself room to move. To most observers, it looked like a retreat, but something in the subtle shift of his stance suggested otherwise. His weight settled differently on his feet, his shoulders relaxed in a way that paradoxically made him seem more dangerous rather than less. Razor Pete moved to Tank's left, his hand drifting toward one of his knives. Boss, wanting to teach this guy some manners? From the doorway of his herb shop, an elderly Chinese man watched the confrontation with growing concern. Uncle Chun recognized his nephew immediately, though Donnie's identity remained unknown to everyone else in the market. Chin's weathered hands gripped the doorframe as he witnessed the dangerous situation developing in front of his store. The market had gone completely silent now, customers and vendors frozen as they watched the standoff unfold. Even the children had stopped playing, sensing the electric tension crackling through the morning air like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Tank cracked his knuckles with deliberate menace as Razor Pete and 2 other gang members, Spider and Meat Hook, spread out to surround the stranger. Market customers backed away instinctively, creating a 20-foot circle around the confrontation. Martha helped Earl to his feet, both watching anxiously as the violence they'd tried to prevent seemed inevitable. Last chance to walk away, hero. Tank growled, rolling his massive shoulders like a boxer preparing for a bout. You got no idea what you're stepping into. The stranger's response was almost conversational. I understand perfectly. You're threatening innocent people who cannot defend themselves. That makes this very simple. Tank threw the first punch, a massive haymaker aimed at ending the fight immediately. His fist, roughly the size of a dinner plate, whistled through the morning air with enough force to drop a horse. But it never found its target. With fluid precision that seemed to bend the laws of physics, the stranger deflected Tank's punch with his left hand while simultaneously striking the biker's solar plexus with his right palm. The technique was so fast, so perfectly executed, that most observers missed it entirely. Tank doubled over, gasping for air he couldn't find. Razor Pete lunged forward with a knife, the blade flashing in the sunlight. But the stranger trapped. His wrist, with movements that flowed like water, applied pressure with surgical precision, and the weapon clattered harmlessly to the pavement. In the same motion, he swept Razor's legs, dropping the scarred lieutenant hard onto the concrete. Spider and Meat Hook attacked together, thinking their combined assault would overwhelm their opponent. Instead, they found themselves facing someone who moved with supernatural grace, each defensive technique flowing seamlessly into a devastating counterattack. His fighting style was pure Wing Chun, efficient, beautiful, and absolutely lethal when applied with this level of mastery. In less than 90 seconds, for bikers lay groaning on the pavement while their opponent hadn't even broken a sweat. His breathing remained calm and controlled, his stance ready for whatever came next. An elderly market customer squinted at the stranger, recognition dawning slowly. "My God," she whispered, her voice carrying across the stunned silence. "That's Donnie Yen." The whisper spread through the crowd like wildfire as people realized they'd just witnessed a martial arts legend in action. Tank Morrison wiped blood from his split lip as the murmur "Donnie Yen" rippled through the gathering crowd like electricity through water. Several market-goers held up their phones, suddenly realizing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Tank's remaining gang members helped their groaning comrades to their feet, the confidence draining from their faces as they processed what had just happened. The legendary martial artist stood calmly in the center of the chaos he'd created, showing no signs of exertion despite having just dismantled four armed men with his bare hands. When Earl extended his hand with military precision, Donnie bowed, slightly before accepting the handshake. "Thank you, sir." Earl Kowalski, Korean War veteran. Donnie Yen. "The honor is mine, Mr. Kowalski." Their grip was firm, the mutual respect evident to everyone watching. Here were two warriors from different worlds, united by their willingness to stand between predators and innocent people. Martha tearfully approached, trying to press vegetables into Donnie's hands as payment, but he politely declined while helping her reorganize her scattered produce. "Please, you saved my livelihood," Martha insisted, her voice trembling with gratitude. "I have to give you something." "Your safety is payment enough," Donnie replied with genuine warmth, his humble demeanor contrasting sharply with the devastating skills he'd just demonstrated. The crowd buzzed with excitement and disbelief. Children who'd grown up watching Donnie's films stared in awe, while their parents snapped photos and asked for autographs. Donnie remained gracious, but clearly uncomfortable with the attention, more concerned with checking on Earl's condition than basking in adulation. Tank struggled to his feet, his face burning with humiliation. Being defeated was bad enough, but being defeated in front of his entire gang by someone half his size had destroyed his carefully cultivated reputation. His authority depended on fear and intimidation, both of which had just evaporated like morning mist. "This ain't over," he snarled, motioning his battered crew toward their motorcycles. Not by a long shot. As the gang mounted their bikes, Tank pulled out his phone and dialed. The engines roared to life, leaving tire marks on the peaceful town square as they sped away. Earl noticed the phone call and mentioned it to Donnie with the tactical awareness of an old soldier. "That one's planning something. I've seen that look before." Uncle Chun hurried from his traditional medicine shop, his weathered face creased with worry and relief as he embraced Donnie warmly. "Nephew, I saw everything. Are you hurt?" The crowd's excitement intensified as they realized the connection. The legendary Donnie Yen wasn't just passing through their small town. He was visiting family. Earl introduced himself to Uncle Chun with the courtly manners of his generation, and the elderly shopkeeper's face lit up with recognition. "Ah, Mr. Kowalski, you buy ginseng tea from me sometimes. Your late wife? She was very kind lady." As Uncle Chun and Earl chatted like old neighbors, Donnie helped Martha finish cleaning up her stand. Market customers approached respectfully, some asking for autographs, others simply thanking him for standing up to the bikers. Through their conversations, Donnie learned that the Crimson Serpents had been terrorizing local businesses for months. "They come every few weeks," Klaus Weber explained, his German accent thick with frustration. "Always demanding money, threatening to destroy what we've built. When we call police, they say is not enough evidence." Earl's expression darkened. "Sheriff Hutchins has been less than helpful with gang problems. Some of us have wondered why." Uncle Chin nodded grimly. "I document everything, dates, times, license plates. But nothing changes. They get bolder every month." The picture emerging was of a systematic campaign of intimidation targeting the most vulnerable members of the community, elderly business owners with no one to protect them. Donnie felt his jaw tighten as he considered the implications. Meanwhile, 5 miles outside town at an abandoned gas station, Tank's gang regrouped. His phone conversation continued with growing intensity. "Sheriff, we got a problem. That martial arts movie star is in town." "Yeah, Donnie Yen. He just humiliated me in front of half the town." The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "Relax, Danny. We'll handle this. Meet me at the warehouse tonight. And bring the heavy equipment. It's time to show these heroes what real power looks like." Tank's humiliation transformed into something darker as he ended the call. Turning to his battered gang, he shouted with renewed confidence, "Boys, change of plans. We're going to make this personal. Real personal." The pieces of a larger conspiracy were falling into place, and the morning's confrontation was about to escalate into something far more dangerous. Uncle Chun insisted on making tea for his guests. In the back room of his shop, away from the lingering crowd of curious onlookers, Earl accepted gratefully, his old bones aching from being knocked to the ground. The small space behind the main shop felt like stepping into another world. Dried herbs hung from wooden beams, ancient ceramic jars lined handmade shelves, and the air carried the mingled scents of ginseng, chrysanthemum, and star anise. Donnie examined the traditional remedies while Uncle Chun prepared chrysanthemum tea with practiced hands, his movements precise despite his 70-plus years. The ritual of preparation seemed to calm all three men after the morning's violence. "I came from Hong Kong 20 years ago," Uncle Chun explained as he poured steaming tea into delicate cups. "Started with nothing but knowledge of traditional medicine. This community, they welcomed me, made me part of their family." Earl sipped his tea thoughtfully. "Margaret used to buy herbs here for her arthritis. Said your remedies worked better than anything the doctors prescribed." The conversation revealed common ground between 3 generations of honorable men. Uncle Chun had been a police officer in Hong Kong before immigrating, while Earl shared stories of his Korean War service. Donnie spoke quietly about using his martial arts platform to help others, finding purpose beyond entertainment. "The gang problem is worse than today," Earl revealed, his military bearing evident even while sitting. "They've been systematically targeting elderly business owners for months. Anyone who complains to police gets told there's insufficient evidence." Uncle Chin nodded grimly. "I keep detailed records, dates, times, license plates, photographs. But Sheriff Hutchins, he says we need witnesses willing to testify. Who will testify when they threaten to burn down your business?" The pattern was clear: vulnerable targets, official indifference, and escalating boldness. Donnie felt anger building beneath his calm exterior. This wasn't random crime, but organized predation designed to exploit the weakest members of society. Around 2 o'clock, police sirens interrupted their conversation. Through the shop window, they watched Sheriff Bradley Hutchins emerge from his patrol car with 2 deputies, his heavy frame moving with purposeful strides toward Uncle Chin's shop. "Uncle," Chin whispered urgently, "that's Sheriff Hutchins. He's never helpful when we report problems." Earl's expression darkened with recognition. Something's not right here. Sheriff Hutchins entered Uncle Chin's shop without knocking, his hand resting casually on his service weapon. His deputies, Officers Burke and Mendez flanked the doorway like sentries. At 52, Hutchins carried himself with the bloated confidence of someone who'd grown accustomed to intimidating people rather than serving them. Heard there was an altercation at the market today, Hutchins announced, his cold gray eyes fixed on Donnie. Someone assaulted some motorcyclists. That's a serious crime in my jurisdiction. Earl stepped forward, his military bearing evident. Sheriff, those bikers were threatening Martha Brennan and demanding protection money. Mr. Yen acted in defense of others. Hutchins dismissed Earl's account with a wave. Danny Morrison and his friends are good citizens who contribute to this community. They told me a different story, said some stranger attacked them unprovoked while they were conducting legitimate business. Uncle Chen's face tightened. Legitimate business? They've been terrorizing shop owners for months. I have documentation. I haven't seen any formal complaints. Hutchins cut him off sharply. And I don't appreciate outsiders stirring up trouble in my town. His gaze returned to Donnie with obvious hostility. You got some kind of permit to practice martial arts in public, Mr. Movie Star? The bias was unmistakable. Hutchins referred to Tank by his first name while treating the victims as troublemakers. His deputies shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware their boss was more interested in protecting criminals than serving justice. Donnie remained calm but alert, recognizing corruption when he saw it. I defended innocent people from threats and violence. In any jurisdiction, that's legal. Funny how you see it that way. Hutchins replied, his tone growing more threatening. Might be we need to have a longer conversation down at the station. As Hutchins prepared to leave, his radio crackled with reports of vandalism on Market Street, motorcycle tire tracks at 3 businesses, property destroyed, threatening messages spray-painted on walls. Instead of concern, Hutchins showed only annoyance that he glanced meaningfully at Donnie. Funny how trouble follows some people around town. You might want to think about moving along before things get worse. After the police left, Uncle Chun locked his shop door and turned to the others with grim determination. We're on our own now. The law won't help us. At 4 o'clock, Martha Brennan called Earl in tears, her voice shaking with devastation. They destroyed everything, Earl. My stand, my truck, everything I had. Earl immediately called Uncle Chen's shop, where Donnie answered. Within minutes, the 3 men were driving toward the market square, Earl's old Buick moving as fast as the veteran dared push it through the quiet residential streets. The destruction was systematic and thorough. Martha's vegetable stand looked like a tornado had hit it, tables overturned, produce scattered and trampled, her delivery truck sitting on slashed tires with its windshield spider-webbed by rocks. Klaus Weber's bakery windows were smashed, flowers scattered like snow across the sidewalk. Peterson's hardware showed similar vandalism, tools stolen and displays destroyed. The message spray-painted in red across all 3 locations was identical. Pay up or get out. Martha stood amid the wreckage of her livelihood, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. At 74, she lacked the strength and resources to rebuild. Klaus swept broken glass with mechanical movements, his shoulders sagging under the weight of financial ruin. Mike Peterson, the Vietnam veteran who owned the hardware store, stood surveying the damage with the 1,000-yard stare of someone reliving old nightmares. I can't afford to replace this, Martha whispered, holding up a destroyed tomato plant she'd grown from seeds saved from her late husband's garden. This was all I had left of him. Donnie knelt beside her, his voice gentle. We'll help you rebuild. All of us. But Earl was studying the crime scene with military precision, his trained eye cataloging details others missed. Fresh motorcycle oil stains led away from each vandalized business, forming a trail toward the industrial district. The tire tracks were distinctive, matching the patterns he'd memorized from the morning's confrontation. Same bikes, same crew. Earl confirmed, pointing out the evidence. They want us to know it was them. This isn't random vandalism. It's a declaration of war. Donnie followed the oil trail with his eyes, noting how it led consistently toward the abandoned industrial area outside town. His jaw tightened as he processed the implications. Then perhaps, he said quietly, we should return the visit. Uncle Chen nodded grimly, remembering his police training. If they're bold enough to do this in daylight, they have protection. Someone powerful is backing them. That evening at Uncle Chen's shop, the 3 men planned their next move over a simple dinner of rice and vegetables. Earl had called his old army buddy, Master Sergeant Roy Fletcher, now working security at nearby Fort Harrison. The phone conversation confirmed Earl's growing suspicions about recent military equipment thefts. Roy says they've been missing inventory for months. Earl explained, setting down the phone with a troubled expression. Night vision goggles, tactical communication equipment, even some weapons. Small amounts each time, hard to track, but it adds up to serious firepower. Uncle Chin leaned forward, his police instincts engaged. That explains their confidence. Common criminals don't escalate this quickly unless they have superior equipment and protection. Donnie processed this information with growing concern. Professional criminals with military weapons and corrupt police protection. This isn't local gang activity, it's organized crime. Earl's military experience filled in the blanks. Roy mentioned federal investigators have been sniffing around the base, asking questions about security protocols. Someone's been very clever about covering their tracks. Uncle Chun contributed local intelligence gathered from 20 years in the community. I've seen unmarked trucks at the abandoned Millbrook Steel Mill, always at night. Sometimes hear machinery running when the building should be empty. The steel mill had been closed for 15 years, its windows boarded and parking lot cracked with weeds. But Uncle Chin's herb-gathering walks had taken him past the facility numerous times, and his police training made him observant of unusual activity. Around 9 o'clock, they drove past the abandoned facility in Earl's Buick, headlights off and engine running quietly. Through binoculars, they spotted lights in the supposedly empty building and several motorcycles parked outside. More significantly, Uncle Chun recognized a black SUV in the shadows. That's Sheriff Hutchins' personal vehicle, he whispered. I've seen it parked at his house. The conspiracy crystallized before their eyes. As they watched, a large truck arrived and men began unloading wooden crates under the cover of darkness. The operation was too organized, too professional for a simple motorcycle gang. Donnie made the decision that would change everything. We need to get closer. We need evidence. Earl checked his service pistol, still carried legally under his concealed permit. Uncle Chun produced a pair of smoke grenades from his days as a Hong Kong police officer. 3 unlikely heroes prepared to take on an enemy far more dangerous than they'd imagined. The next morning, Sheriff Hutchins arrived at Uncle Chin's shop with an arrest warrant bearing Donnie's name. The charges, assault and battery on Danny, Tank, Morrison, and 3 other citizens, were clearly fabricated, but the legal document gave Hutchins the authority he needed to remove the biggest threat to his operation. Mr. Yen, you're under arrest, Hutchins announced with barely concealed satisfaction, his 2 deputies flanking him with handcuffs ready. You have the right to remain silent, though I doubt you'll use it. Uncle Chun protested vigorously. This is outrageous. My nephew defended innocent people from criminals. Your nephew assaulted upstanding members of this community, Hutchins replied coldly. The law applies to everyone, even movie stars. Donnie submitted peacefully to arrest, recognizing that resistance would only escalate the situation and potentially endanger his uncle and Earl. As they placed him in handcuffs, he quietly told Uncle Chun and Earl to be careful, his eyes conveying the urgency of an unspoken warning. The timing was clearly coordinated. Within minutes of the patrol car leaving, motorcycle engines roared as the Crimson Serpents arrived in overwhelming force. 12 gang members surrounded Uncle Chin's shop, but this time they carried military-grade equipment, automatic weapons, tactical gear, and body armor that transformed them from street thugs into a paramilitary unit. Tank Morrison dismounted his bike with newfound confidence, an assault rifle slung across his massive chest. The humiliation of the previous day had been replaced by cold determination and superior firepower. His gang spread out with military precision, covering all escape routes from the herb shop. Where's your kung fu hero now? Tank shouted through a megaphone, his amplified voice echoing off the surrounding buildings. Come out and face justice like men. Uncle Chun and Earl barricaded themselves inside the shop, Earl's military experience guiding their defensive preparations. Through the windows, they could see the overwhelming odds, heavily armed criminals with professional equipment and unlimited confidence. They planned this perfectly, Earl observed grimly, checking his service pistol. Remove Donnie, then eliminate the witnesses. Uncle Chun activated his police scanner, hoping to call for genuine law enforcement assistance. Instead, they heard only routine traffic, no emergency response, no backup coming. They were truly on their own against an enemy that had every advantage. Except moral authority. At the police station, Hutchins left Donnie handcuffed in an interrogation room while stepping outside to coordinate with the bikers. Through the window, Donnie watched the sheriff signal Tank's gang, who had positioned themselves around the building like a military perimeter. The trap was perfectly orchestrated. They would claim Donnie was attempting to escape custody when they killed him. Hutchins returned and unlocked Donnie's handcuffs with theatrical concern. Oops, looks like our prisoner might try to flee. Terrible shame when suspects resist arrest. The interrogation room door stood open, an obvious invitation to escape into the waiting ambush. But Donnie had spent decades studying action sequences and understanding how to exploit environments. While Hutchins coordinated with Tank outside, Donnie tested the window lock. Corroded by years of neglect, it gave way with gentle pressure. Tank and 4 gang members burst through the front entrance, automatic weapons ready, expecting to find their target helpless and restrained. Instead, they found the interrogation room empty, handcuffs neatly placed on the table, and a window open to the alley behind the building. "Where is he?" Tank roared, his professional demeanor cracking. The place was surrounded. Donnie had already disappeared into the maze of back alleys behind the police station, using skills learned from countless film shoots combined with genuine martial arts training in stealth and evasion. He moved through the residential area like a ghost, avoiding main streets where patrol cars might spot him. 20 minutes later, he arrived at Uncle Chin's shop through the network of service alleys that connected downtown Millbrook's older buildings. He found his uncle and Earl barricaded inside, monitoring police communications on the scanner. "Thank God you're safe," Uncle Chun whispered as Donnie slipped through the back entrance. "They have the building surrounded." Earl briefed him quickly on the tactical situation. 12 heavily armed gang members with military equipment. No police response coming, and escape routes systematically blocked. The situation had escalated from local crime to urban warfare. Roy Fletcher's voice crackled through Earl's cell phone with disturbing news. Federal agents were en route to investigate the weapons trafficking, but the missing military equipment included enough firepower to outfit a small army. Moreover, the investigation had uncovered connections reaching into federal law enforcement. As Earl hung up, Tank's amplified voice boomed from outside. "Come out now, or we burn down the whole block," building with military precision. Tank wore body armor and carried a megaphone along with his assault rifle, transforming from street thug into battlefield commander. The escalation was complete. This was no longer intimidation, but open warfare in the heart of a peaceful community. Earl applied his Korean War experience to assess their defensive position, noting sight lines, cover, and potential escape routes. Uncle Chun contributed intimate knowledge of the building's layout, including the basement connection to abandoned subway tunnels from the 1940s. Donnie calculated how to neutralize multiple armed opponents in close quarters. "We can't win a firefight against this firepower," Earl stated with military pragmatism. "But we can take the fight to them on our terms." Their plan required combining all 3 men's strengths: Earl's tactical knowledge, Uncle Chen's local expertise, and Donnie's combat skills. Rather than wait for the gang to dictate terms, they would strike at the source, the steel mill where the weapons cache was stored. Uncle Chun revealed the building's secret: a basement tunnel that connected to the old Millbrook subway system, abandoned since before World War II. "I explored these tunnels as a boy. They lead to the industrial district." Earl checked his service pistol and spare ammunition, while Uncle Chun produced an unexpected arsenal from his herb shop: smoke grenades saved from his Hong Kong police days and detailed maps of the underground passages. Using Uncle Chin's knowledge of the tunnel system, they escaped undetected while the gang maintained their siege of the empty building. The tunnels were dark and cramped, filled with decades of debris, but they provided invisible passage beneath the town. They emerged 3 blocks away near Earl's car, the Buick hidden in an alley behind the old library. As they drove toward the steel mill, Earl shared intel from Roy Fletcher. Federal investigators had identified the trafficking network but didn't know about local corruption. "Roy's sending real federal agents," Earl explained, "but they won't arrive until tomorrow. We're still on our own tonight." Uncle Chun checked his smoke grenades while Donnie prepared mentally for what would likely be the most dangerous fight of his life. Three unlikely heroes approached their final battle against an enemy with every advantage except honor. The steel mill loomed against the night sky, its broken windows like dead eyes watching their approach to the abandoned steel mill. Their carefully planned assault initially succeeded beyond expectations. Earl used his military expertise to identify guard positions and patrol patterns. Uncle Chun created diversions with strategically placed smoke grenades, and Donnie systematically neutralized sentries using stealth and precision strikes that left them unconscious but alive. Working as a seamless team, they penetrated the facility's outer defenses and reached the main warehouse. The scope of the criminal operation stunned them. Wooden crates filled with military weapons, communication equipment, and ammunition worth millions of dollars. Donnie photographed everything while Earl documented serial numbers, and Uncle Chun kept watch. Their evidence gathering was interrupted by the arrival of Sheriff Hutchins, who drove up to the mill with surprising confidence for someone visiting a supposedly abandoned building. Hidden in the shadows, they watched him inspect the weapons cache and coordinate with gang members about the morning's final sale to international buyers. Earl managed to contact Roy Fletcher, who immediately dispatched genuine federal agents to the location. For 30 minutes, victory seemed certain. They had evidence, backup was coming, and the conspiracy would be exposed. Tank's gang celebrated prematurely, counting money from advance payments while preparing for the dawn transaction, when black SUVs arrived with flashing lights. Earl, Uncle Chun, and Donnie emerged from hiding with their evidence, expecting vindication. The relief of surviving their dangerous mission made them careless, and they approached the vehicles with grateful exhaustion. But the lead agent greeted Sheriff Hutchins like an old friend. "Sorry we're late, Brad. These civilians giving you trouble?" The crushing realization hit them simultaneously. These weren't federal agents, but Hutchins' contacts in the trafficking network. The conspiracy reached far deeper than local corruption, extending into federal law enforcement itself. Earl whispered desperately into his phone to Roy Fletcher. "It's bigger than we thought. The corruption goes federal. We need real help." But Tank appeared behind them with automatic weapons, his scarred face grinning with victory. "Nobody's making any more phone calls, old man. You three just graduated from witnesses to casualties." The trap had closed perfectly. Professional criminals with federal protection had anticipated every move, and three heroes found themselves completely surrounded with no hope of rescue. Their greatest victory had become their final defeat. Earl, Uncle Chun, and Donnie were forced at gunpoint into the steel mill's main warehouse, where the true scope of the criminal enterprise became horrifyingly clear. This wasn't just local corruption, but an organized weapons trafficking network with tentacles reaching deep into federal law enforcement. The corrupt agents moved with professional precision, their equipment and coordination revealing years of experience in eliminating inconvenient witnesses. The three heroes were systematically separated to prevent coordination. Uncle Chun, the oldest and most fragile, was beaten unconscious by two gang members and dragged to a storage room where his groans echoed off rusted machinery. Earl was zip-tied to a metal chair in the warehouse office, blood trickling from his split lip as Tank prepared to interrogate him about his military contacts. Donnie found himself chained to a support beam in the main warehouse area, positioned where he could witness the full scope of the weapons cache while contemplating his helplessness. Heavy steel shackles secured his wrists, the chains anchored to concrete foundations that had supported industrial equipment for decades. Tank revealed his background with obvious pride. Dishonorably discharged from Army Special Forces for excessive brutality, he'd built the trafficking network using connections from his military service. The corrupt federal agents were actually retired military contractors working for international arms dealers who paid substantially better than government salaries. "You movie stars think you're so tough," Tank sneered, examining a combat knife. While Earl watched helplessly. "Let's see how tough you are when the cameras stop rolling." Sheriff Hutchins provided local protection in exchange for a substantial cut of profits, his badge serving as perfect cover for the operation. Small-town corruption had evolved into international crime, with Millbrooks serving as a distribution hub for weapons destined for global black markets. Around midnight, Tank received a phone call confirming the morning's major sale. International buyers would arrive by boat at dawn to purchase the entire weapons cache. Earl overheard enough to understand the urgency. By sunrise, the evidence would disappear forever, along with anyone who could testify about the conspiracy. Uncle Chun regained consciousness briefly, whispering to himself in Cantonese before slipping back into darkness. The three heroes who had stood together against injustice now faced their darkest hour in isolation, each contemplating failure and the innocent people they'd been unable to protect. At T2 in the morning, Donnie sat chained in the warehouse, surrounded by the evidence of corruption he could no longer expose. Through grimy windows, he watched Earl being periodically beaten for information about his military contacts while Uncle Chun lay motionless in the storage room. The gang celebrated their impending payoff with bottles of stolen liquor, their laughter echoing off the metal walls. For the first time in years, Donnie questioned whether his life had any real meaning. Had his martial arts films inspired genuine heroism, or merely provided empty entertainment for people who would never face real danger? The philosophical teachings of his youth seemed inadequate against the brutal reality of professional criminals. With unlimited resources and federal protection, he thought about Uncle Chin's 20 years of quiet service to the Millbrook community, building bridges between cultures through patience and kindness. He remembered Earl's lifetime of military service, defending strangers in a foreign war and continuing to protect his neighbors even in his twilight years. Both men had trusted him to make a difference, and he'd led them into a trap that would likely cost their lives. The weight of failure pressed down like the steel chains binding his wrists. Through the warehouse windows, he could see boats approaching on the river, the international buyers arriving early for their weapons purchase. By dawn, the evidence would be gone and the conspiracy would vanish like morning mist. Tank's voice carried across the warehouse as he coordinated final preparations. Load everything into the boats by sunrise. No witnesses, no evidence, no problems. Donnie tested his chains methodically, his fingers exploring every link for weakness. The metal had been corroded by years of dampness in the abandoned mill, and one connection point showed promising deterioration. Using a martial arts technique learned in childhood, he dislocated his thumb to slip one hand through the narrowed shackle. Around 3 o'clock, Uncle Chun regained consciousness and managed to crawl toward Earl's location. Despite his injuries, he whispered words of faith. "My nephew, not finished yet. He is thinking, planning. Have faith in what we taught him." Earl, his face battered but his spirit unbroken, responded with military determination. "Then we better be ready to help when he makes his move." Uncle Chun began working at Earl's bonds with a small herb-cutting knife he'd kept hidden, while Donnie systematically weakened his corroded chains in the darkness. At 4 in the morning, Donnie used his dislocated thumb to slip free of the corroded chain, moving silently in the pre-dawn darkness. The gang had relaxed their vigilance, confident that their prisoners were secure and their victory assured. Most of the bikers had passed out from drinking, while the corrupt federal agents focused on coordinating the final weapons transfer. Donnie moved through the abandoned mill like a phantom, using every stealth technique from his film training combined with genuine martial arts mastery. The building's industrial layout provided perfect cover. Massive machinery, conveyor belts, and support structures created shadows where a skilled infiltrator could move undetected. He neutralized guards silently, one by one, using pressure point techniques that rendered them unconscious without permanent damage. Each takedown was calculated and precise, designed to eliminate threats without alerting the remaining criminals. His years of studying martial arts philosophy guided his actions. Use only necessary force, protect the innocent, minimize harm, even to enemies. Working systematically toward the storage room, Donnie found Uncle Chin conscious but badly injured. His uncle's weathered face showed relief and pride as his nephew carefully lifted him to a safer location behind abandoned equipment. "Can you walk?" Donnie whispered. Uncle Chin nodded weakly. "I can help. This is my town too." Together, they reached Earl, who had been partially freed by Uncle Chin's earlier efforts with the herb knife. The old soldier's eyes blazed with determination despite his injuries. "Can you fight?" Donnie asked. Earl's response was pure military resolve. "Son, I've been fighting longer than you've been alive. The three men surveyed their situation as dawn approached. Through the warehouse windows, they could see the international buyer's boat anchored at the river dock, professional soldiers disembarking with their own security team. Tank coordinated with Sheriff Hutchins and the corrupt agents to prepare for the final transaction. "We've got maybe 30 minutes before this place is crawling with international criminals," Earl observed, checking his watch. Uncle Chun, despite his injuries, insisted on contributing. "I know every passage in this building from my youth. There are ways to move they don't know about." Donnie prepared mentally for the most important fight of his life, not for fame or entertainment, but for justice and the protection of innocent people who depended on them. As the sun rose at 5:30, a large speedboat approached the river. Dock adjacent to the steel mill, 8 heavily armed buyers disembarked, professional soldiers from an unnamed foreign organization, moving with military precision that marked them as elite operatives rather than common criminals. Tank coordinated with Sheriff Hutchins and the corrupt federal agents to finalize the weapons transfer that would net millions in profits. Earl used his Korean War experience to identify optimal positions for their desperate assault, noting sight lines, cover, and escape routes throughout the mill's industrial maze. Uncle Chin's knowledge of the building's layout from his youth proved invaluable. Hidden passages, emergency exits, and structural weaknesses that could be exploited tactically. Donnie prepared to engage multiple armed opponents simultaneously, knowing this would require every technique he'd mastered over decades of training. Unlike choreographed film fights, this battle would be lethal, chaotic, and unforgiving. They executed a coordinated three-pronged attack designed to maximize confusion and minimize their exposure to superior firepower. Earl created diversions, using his remaining ammunition and military tactics, drawing attention while providing covering fire. Uncle Chin triggered fire alarms and emergency lighting systems, creating chaos that masked their movements. Donnie engaged in direct combat, using the industrial environment to his advantage. The initial assault succeeded partially. They eliminated several guards and disrupted the weapons sale, forcing the international buyers to take defensive positions, rather than complete their transaction. But their small victory was short-lived as professional soldiers rallied under Tank's leadership. The corrupt federal agents coordinated a systematic counterattack, using their law enforcement training to organize the criminal response. The international buyers proved to be combat veterans who didn't panic under fire, instead forming defensive perimeters and calling for reinforcements. Within an hour of fighting, the three heroes found themselves trapped on the mill's main floor, surrounded by enemies with superior numbers and firepower. Earl had taken a bullet in the shoulder, but continued fighting with grim determination. Uncle Chun could barely stand but refused to abandon his companions. Even Donnie showed signs of exhaustion after engaging dozens of opponents in continuous combat. Tank Morrison, enraged by the disruption of his profitable empire, armed himself with military-grade weapons and body armor. His face twisted with fury as he approached for the final confrontation that would determine whether justice or corruption would triumph in Millbrook. Tank Morrison strapped on military body armor and hefted an automatic rifle, his scarred face twisted with rage at seeing his criminal empire crumbling around him. The weapons sale had been disrupted, his gang was scattered, and 3 civilians had made him look like a fool in front of international buyers who demanded professionalism. "Above all else, I'm gonna kill all 3 of you myself," Tank snarled, advancing through the warehouse with deadly intent. "Should have minded your own business, old man." The climactic battle between Tank and Donnie showcased everything that made Golden Age action heroes legendary. Tank relied on modern military weapons and brute force, spraying automatic fire that shredded machinery and shattered windows. Donnie countered with traditional martial arts enhanced by intelligence and environmental awareness, using the mill's industrial landscape to neutralize his opponent's firepower advantage. The fight ranged throughout the steel mill's maze of catwalks, conveyor belts, and heavy machinery. Donnie used Wing Chun's flowing techniques to stay mobile, never allowing Tank to pin him down with sustained fire. When Tank's rifle jammed, Donnie closed the distance with lightning speed, but the gang leader's size and armor made him formidable. In close combat, Tank fought with desperate fury, knowing his criminal enterprise was finished if he couldn't eliminate the witnesses. His military training made him dangerous even without weapons, but rage clouded his tactical judgment. Donnie remained calm under pressure, waiting for openings while avoiding Tank's devastating attacks. The battle reached its climax on the mill's upper catwalk, where Tank cornered Donnie near the old blast furnace. With nowhere to retreat, Donnie seemed trapped as Tank raised his rifle for the killing shot. But Earl, despite his shoulder wound, provided the crucial distraction by hurling a piece of heavy machinery debris that spoiled Tank's aim. The momentary opening allowed Donnie to deliver a decisive Wing Chun chain punch combination that sent Tank crashing through the catwalk railing. However, Tank's final act of desperation changed everything. As he fell, he triggered an explosive device strapped to his chest. If he couldn't win, he would bring down the entire mill with everyone inside. The timer showed 90 seconds before detonation, and they were trapped on the upper level with limited escape routes. With 90 seconds before the building exploded, Donnie helped Uncle Chun toward the emergency exit while Earl provided covering fire against the remaining gang members. The corrupt federal agents had fled when they realized Tank's explosive device would destroy all evidence of their involvement, leaving only the most loyal bikers to face the inevitable. Sheriff Hutchins appeared in the main corridor with his service weapon drawn, blocking their escape route with cold determination. The corrupt lawman had decided to eliminate all witnesses rather than face exposure and prosecution for his crimes. "You should have taken the hint and left town," Hutchins snarled, raising his pistol. "Now you're all gonna die in an industrial accident." The desperate firefight that followed tested every man's courage and resolve. Earl, despite his wounded shoulder, drew fire away from Donnie and Uncle Chun by advancing directly at Hutchins with his service pistol. The old soldier moved with the tactical precision learned in Korean War battles, using cover and movement to close the distance. With 60 seconds remaining on Tank's timer, Earl made the ultimate sacrifice that defined his character. Despite his age and injuries, he charged Hutchins's position to protect his companions, taking multiple hits but continuing to advance until his ammunition was exhausted. "Go!" Earl shouted to Donnie and Uncle Chun as he fell. "Get out of here!" Donnie carried Uncle Chun toward the exit as Earl's sacrifice created the opening they needed. The old veteran's final act embodied everything the target audience cherished: duty before self, protection of the innocent, and completion of the mission regardless of personal cost. With 30 seconds remaining, the building's structure began failing as Tank's explosive device prepared to detonate. Donnie managed to carry Uncle Chun clear of the mill just as the massive explosion destroyed the warehouse, eliminating the weapons cache and most of the criminal evidence that in the aftermath. As emergency vehicles finally arrived, Donnie knelt beside Earl, who had survived the explosion but was critically injured. Blood stained the old soldier's shirt, but his eyes remained alert and determined. Did we get them all?" Earl whispered, his voice barely audible above the sirens. Donnie nodded, tears in his eyes. "We got them all, my friend. The town is safe." Earl smiled weakly, his duty finally complete. Margaret would be proud. 3 days later, Earl lay in Millbrook General Hospital, alive but recovering from serious injuries sustained in the steel mill explosion. Real federal agents, summoned by Roy Fletcher when Earl's emergency calls finally reached legitimate authorities, had arrested the surviving members of the trafficking network, including Sheriff Hutchins and the corrupt federal contractors. The investigation revealed the conspiracy's staggering scope: weapons stolen from military bases across 3 states, sold to international criminal organizations, with profits shared among corrupt officials at multiple levels of government. The case made national news, with Donnie Yen praised as a real-life action hero who helped break up an international arms trafficking ring. Roy Fletcher arrived from Fort Harrison to personally thank Earl for his service. "The weapons you helped recover would have armed terrorists. For decades, you saved countless lives, my friend." Earl deflected the praise with characteristic humility. "Just did what any soldier would do. Protect the innocent, complete the mission." Uncle Chun recovered from his injuries with the resilience of someone who'd survived multiple hardships. His herb shop reopened within a week, now bearing a small plaque commemorating the heroes of Millbrook who'd risked everything to protect their community. Donnie consistently deflected media attention, crediting Earl's courage and Uncle Chin's local knowledge for their success. When reporters asked about his martial arts heroics, he redirected focus to the real issues: community safety, protecting vulnerable citizens, and honoring those who serve others. The market vendors who'd been terrorized by the gang visited Earl daily in the hospital. Martha Brennan brought vegetables from her rebuilt stand, funded by community donations. Klaus Weber provided fresh bread baked specially for Earl's recovery. Mike Peterson presented a custom-made walking cane to replace the one Tank had broken, carved with military insignia honoring Earl's service. "This is what we fought for," Earl said tearfully as he accepted their gifts. Good people being able to live in peace, building something beautiful together. The bonds forged in crisis had created a stronger community, with neighbors looking out for each other and refusing to tolerate those who preyed on the vulnerable. Evil had been defeated not just by martial arts skills, but by ordinary people standing together against injustice. 1 month later, Earl had recovered enough to return to the Saturday farmers market, walking with his new cane but his military bearing prouder than ever. The market bustled with normal activity: family shopping, children playing, vendors calling out prices for fresh produce. The fear that had gripped Millbrook for months had been replaced by renewed community spirit. Uncle Chin's herb shop had reopened with a new sign reading Traditional Medicine and Community Center. Earl stopped by for his usual ginseng tea, where Uncle Chun mentioned that Donnie was preparing to leave town now that the crisis had passed. "He says his work here is finished," Uncle Chun explained, preparing tea with his customary precision. "But I think this experience changed him. He understands now that being a hero isn't about movies. It's about standing up when others cannot." Earl found Donnie at the town square, sitting quietly on a bench and watching the peaceful scene they'd fought to preserve. The martial arts legend looked tired but content, having discovered that real heroism required personal sacrifice and commitment to others rather than choreographed action sequences. "You leaving today?" Earl asked, settling beside his friend with a grateful smile. Donnie nodded. "My uncle is safe. The community is protected. Time to go home." They sat in comfortable silence, two warriors from different worlds who'd found common ground in their dedication to protecting innocent people. Earl represented traditional American values of duty and service, while Donnie embodied Eastern philosophy about using strength responsibly. "You know," Earl said finally, "Margaret always told me that good people recognize each other, no matter where they come from or what they look like. She would have liked you." Donnie smiled genuinely. "The honor was mine, Mr. Kowalski. You reminded me why we train, why we fight, why strength must always serve justice." As Donnie prepared to leave, Earl stood and extended his hand for a final handshake between equals. "True strength protects those who cannot protect themselves," Donnie said, echoing the wisdom that had guided their partnership. Earl watched his friend drive away, then turned back to the thriving market where Martha Brennan waved from her rebuilt vegetable stand. The cycle of community life continued, stronger for having been tested and proven resilient against those who would exploit the vulnerable through fear and violence. If you like the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.